and you also know how we what do you say, like how we basically the architecture, and then even the Git branching strategy you already know. So since you have already had some hands-on on it, so I just don't want to take much of your time. But I'll just kind of do a briefing as to how we do it, and if you guys have any doubts, you can we can discuss. So Shireri, are you recording?
Yeah, recording started.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so coming to the conflict management part, so when you say configuration management, right? So there are two parts to it. So one part is with respect to the code that you write, right? So there is one set of configurations that you need for your code, so which are basically very local to your service, to your code. And then there is another set of configurations which are like environment configurations, which we pull from the environment. Say for example, let's say you want to let's say you have a configuration parameter that is for database, right? So you want to connect to a database. Now the connection to a database is not just local to your service, right? In your microservices based ecosystem, all the services that are a part of your system will need that variable anyway. So there is no point of creating a specific variable just for your service. Instead, you create like an environment variable so that any service which needs this MongoDB connection can utilize the same. Okay. So that is the idea. Say, for example, Kafka cluster, right? The Bootstrap server IP that we configure. So that also is common across all modules. So there is no point of creating like a local variable. But say, let's say you need a uh, okay, let's say you need a very specific key for your code. Say, for example, it's a Boolean variable with which you decide some piece of logic, whether this should execute or that should execute. That, now, that variable is not used by anyone. That variable is only used by you. So now you have a choice. Either you add it as an environment variable, which is always the best scenario because that gives you more freedom. You can make the changes to the variable as and then you want. Or you make it a variable that is very local to your code, so that I mean, only if you don't want to change it on the fly, you can just make it what do you call, very the scope will only be up to your service. So in that case, you don't necessarily have to make it as an environment variable. So whenever you want to change, you change. The idea is to ensure that there is no hard coding there. So basically, no type of hard coding should be existing at all. Okay. So even if it's a small string value or a Boolean value or whatever that is, if you think that this piece of code or this particular value has influence on the flow of your logic or your flow of data, or any basically if it has any influence on your core logic, then in that case you should be making it as a configuration parameter. Okay, you should not be hard coding it in your service. So this part is basically the coding standard part, so to say, not exactly config management, so to say, but it's more like your coding standards, because you should know what should be hard coded, what should not be hard coded. So variables that are very local to your service, make them as configurations. You have a choice whether you want to put it to environment or not. But my suggestion always would be to put it to environment. I mean, basically take it from environment variable because that gives you more freedom, right? So you don't have to build every time if you want to make any change there. So that is the reason. Now there are some variables like Kafka, Mongo that I mentioned, which have to be your environment variables at any cost. So to give you guys a example, can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Okay, say for example, this is the document which has Anuvaad module config guidelines. Okay, so these are the two types. So configurations outside the build and configurations within the build. So outside the build as in configurations which when changed, you don't have to create a new build. So for example, let's say Kafka Bootstrap server, right? That is one variable which all of us use. Now, if that value changes, you don't have to build your code again. You just have to deploy. That's how technically it should work. You don't have to create a new build. You just have to deploy. But there are parameters with which when changed will force you to create a new build. Say for example, Okay, in translator, there is a use case where for TMX flow, should we use a labse based alignment or should we use a attention based alignment? So in yesterday's KT, I mentioned how TMX works, right? How TMX makes use of labse to find out which phrase of the source is aligned to which part of the target. Now that alignment logic can either come from labse or laser, or one of the other ways is through attention. So we already have our NMT model, right, which can give you attention outputs for every translation. So you just use that attention to find out which is the alignment. Now there is a variable which decides that should it use labse or should it use attention. Now this is a very local variable translator. I mean, workflow manager or word detector or any service has nothing to do with this variable. So this is very local to my service, and that's why I've not added it to the environment. Technically, I should have, but I've not added it to the environment, let's say. So in that case, whenever I want to make a change, say for example, now labs went down and I want to point it to attention based flow now. So what should I do? Go to my config file, change that variable, create a new build and then deploy. So the difference between these two type of configurations is one will need a new build, one will not need a new build. Okay. And that is what is explained here also. So basically those variables where you don't have to create a build, basically there is no rebuild required, but here a rebuild is required. So what do we do here? Here we, okay, where are we adding our configurations? In your code, we add it in our configs.py. So we have a standard format, right, of our folder structure. So all our coding that we do is a standard MVC format. Okay, although MVC is considered to be very local to Spring Framework, but originally MVC is a coding pattern. You can use it in any service. And here in Anuvaad, although we write a Python code, we still follow MVC because MVC is a very clean coding structure. Okay. So you have configs, controllers, Kafka, model, repository, service, tools, utilities, validator, all of that. So this configs by default will always have a configs.py file. And inside the configs.py, you mention all your configurations. Okay. So now here, if you see, so now here, so there is a, see this bootstrap server variable, right? So this bootstrap server variable has this value. Now this is a global variable. So this goes to environment because it should be read from the environment for all services. Now, why am I repeating this is, let's say there are 10 microservices in our ecosystem and all of them need Kafka. All of them should not be creating a new variable. They- all of them should be using a same variable. Remember that. These are called as cross-module configurations. Okay, configurations which are used across modules. So in such configurations, please don't keep on creating new variable like Kafka Bootstrap Server, Workflow Manager, Kafka Bootstrap Server Translator, Kafka Bootstrap Server Word Detector. You should not be like that. All of them are connected to a single Kafka queue, because of which all of them should be using the same Kafka server host. Okay. So please don't create duplicate variables for cross-module configurations. Is that clear?
Got
As
it.
yeah, as same. Okay. Same goes with Mongo, same goes with Kafka and other stuff. Like if there are, suppose you are using Redis, you can do the same thing. But now if you see, okay, let's say this is the thing, right? So this is one variable in Workflow Manager. Page default limit is nothing but the amount of sentences in a page, I think. Yeah, I think that is the variable. Let me just cross verify because Workflow Manager has a lot of configurations. Or let's take one of the other examples, right? Let's say context path. Now context path of workflow manager is Anuvaad ETL workflow manager. Now, will this be used by word detector and other modules? Maybe, may not be. But in our case, we usually don't use because no one actually makes an API call back to workflow manager. So in our use case, we usually don't use this context path anywhere. So I don't actually need to give it to environment because it's a very local variable. But if I don't give it to environment, what is the problem? Whenever I want to make a change here, then I'll have to rebuild my code, which I don't want to do. That's why all configurations, irrespective whether they are module specific configurations or cross module configurations, should all be going to the environment variable or the environment file. Is that clear? Uh, next is this. Next is the naming convention. Naming convention, you can follow whatever you want, but one convention that we have adopted is all capital letters for variables. So let's say this is a variable, okay? Kafka dot bootstrap dot server dot host. Okay, this is your standard Spring format of variables. Like if you guys know Spring Java, so in Spring Boot we have application properties. Like that application property is what translates to config.py in this code. Okay, so like how we have config.py here, we usually have application properties in a Spring Boot Java application. So there you usually give it in this way, small letters with dot separator. So now that when it goes to the environment, it usually translates to a format where all alphabets become capital and all special characters become underscore. So it will become like this. Okay, so this is a standard Open API format, like how we have Open API standards, right? Similarly, for variables also, these are the common standards which people follow. Since that standard is already available, we just use the same here. So all the variables will have capital letters with the underscore as their delimiter or separating character. Okay, so that is one thing. So this is the variable name, and this is the value. The value should always be a proper English term. Please don't try to do any shorthands. If it is a standard shorthand, please go ahead and do it. But if it is not a standard shorthand, say for example DB, DB is a well-known shorthand for database. So you don't have to actually call it database. WFM is a standard shorthand for workflow manager. So everyone knows that it is. ETL is a standard shorthand for extract, transform, load type of mechanism. So these are standard shorthands which are used across the globe. So we have used it. But if you're using a term, this is not a standard shorthand. Say for example, initiate. Now, if I could have just said I and I, right? I or I and IT is still okay because I and I init is still a standard variable. But if I write I and I, it makes no sense. So always make sure that the values are proper English terms and follow a format. The Kafka topic should always have hyphen as the delimiter with a module name, your category name, and what exactly is the use case. So this use case is workflow initiate, and then a version, because topics should have it's a very good practice to have versions to the topics, because there is a chance where one topic gets corrupted, right? Say for example, by mistake you push in a non-serializable data onto the queue. At that time, whoever is reading from that topic will run into a very vicious loop of throwing exceptions. Or what if something else got pushed into the Kafka queue which is not meant to go there? So it is always better to have versions to the Kafka queue so that whenever there is a problem like that, you just update the version and create a clean topic. So please remember that. There is the same configuration for consumer groups as well. And yeah, so if you see the work to DB again, you'll see this is the module name, this is the use category, ETL or extractor or whatever. And then this is the module name, that is workflow manager, and this is the database. Same goes with collection name. So just follow this value and variable naming format because that becomes very important. Okay, so these also are common variables, like for example, tool, aligner, tokenizer, all of that. These are very local to workflow manager. So I mean, these don't change at all because workflow manager is the one which decides these values. So it's not like kind of dependent or there is no standards or anything. If you see, this value comes from a standard of the platform. So on Anuvaad, we have defined that a topic name should be like this, a consumer name should be like this. So the format of these values is dependent on the format of the platform, or basically the design principles of the platform. But whereas these values are very local to workflow manager. So they are very, so there is no format or there is no standard or anything. Workflow manager can decide whatever it wants to do with it. So that's why they are not put to environment. They are directly used from here. Is that clear? So these are local variables which are very local to the service. Then these are local variables which are local to the service but follow a certain standard in terms of topic, consumer, etc., which are used across modules. Then there's the third category of configuration, which is cross-module configurations. So for cross-module configurations, please don't create duplicate keys. For your module-specific configurations, please make sure that the naming format for the keys and the values is perfect. Same goes with your local variables as well. Is that clear? Any doubt? Any
No queries.
awesome. So please, I mean, these are very simple, but it becomes very important. Okay, if you don't follow this, then for whoever looks at the code will have a lot of problem because they will not even understand what standard are these guys following, right? So it's important that no matter it might take 2 seconds more for you to kind of get this live, but please make sure that this is done.
Okay.
Yeah. So that is the format. Okay, then there is one thing that I want you guys to be aware of. Okay, I'll just show you with an example. Okay, let's take our configurations. Okay, I want you guys to just check this. I mean, this is just a pro tip. Okay, so basically what happens is in all environment files, especially in your Docker Swarm or a Docker Kubernetes type of setup, when you add environment files and when you add an environment file and give variables out there, then the value by default is of a string format. Say for example, translator tmx enabled is a key, and you ask Shiva to set this to true. So he'll set it to true. But when he sets it to true, that is a string true. It's not a Boolean true because the environment file does not recognize data types apart from string. So when your Python code or even Java code for that matter, when these read those environment files, they will read it as a string. But inside the code, you would have assumed it as a Boolean, correct? So wherever you're doing a Boolean check, all those checks will fail. So the same applies for Booleans and numbers. For strings, there is no problem. String, so it is string here also, and it is string in the environment variable also. But when you read numbers and when you read Boolean, you will have a problem. So please make sure that you do some lot of typecasting. Is that clear?
Got
So
it.
you need that typecasting will be done for numbers and booleans. So just kind of pro tip that you guys might need. Okay, so this is your local configuration, and that is your, and see, for example, translator has so many configurations. So if these configurations are not there, then it becomes very difficult to make any change in translator. So, and always remember, one of the signs of a good developer is to make as many configurations as possible. Okay. Your code should be highly configurable, as in, if I want to change the flow tomorrow, I should be able to change. Like, for example, I can enable disable TMX right from here. What if I want to enable TMX, but I just want to disable org level? It can be done here. If you want TMX user disabled, it can be done here. What if user translation memory should be disabled? You can just do it from here. You don't have to do any change in the code. So always make sure that you create as many switches as possible for your code, which are nothing but configurations. That's a very good practice of coding. Now, user translation, say for one more cross config variable example is this one. Okay, user translation enabled key is used in two modules, translator and content handler. So both of them use the same key. So yeah, so in ideal situation, we are usually kind of prone to creating duplicate variables, like one for translator and one for content handler. But we should be conscious enough to make sure that such mistakes are not happening. Okay. That is one thing. And yeah, see, for example, roles, the org for which NMT should be disabled, the roles for which TMX should be disabled. You get it? So those things are very important. So once you have, so this config file is nothing but the switchboard of your application. You switch it on, off wherever you want. And this is very important. Okay. This is exactly what makes your code powerful. So yeah, this is bit on the config management part. Do you guys have any doubts on the configuration? And there are also certain standards that I've configured. So yeah, I mean, just say for example, okay, these are some practices. Okay, folder structure should be perfectly maintained, as in config, controller, all of that. If you are following a MVC pattern, and then never check in sensitive values like AWS keys. Okay, so so Ulka has file store, which is Ulka file store, which is like a wrapper for AWS, Azure, GCP, and all cloud services. So similarly, that is going to be used in Anuvaad as well, because I've already spoken to Shriri. Please take it from Ulka and port it to Anuvaad, because even Anuvaad will need a file store. Please don't rewrite code for AWS upload, Azure upload, and all that. Please make use of what is already existing. So in that case, it's a very common mistake that developers do, where they check in keys and sensitive information inside the configuration. Say, for example, you are trying to use an email to send emails. Now, for that email, you need a password, right? Which is configured in the configuration file, obviously. Now, if you already check in the same configuration which is already there, as in if you just check in the bare string password, then that is a sensitivity problem, right? Anyone can just read through and can hack your system. So please make sure that that is never there. Of course, even if you check in, Git will send you an alert right away saying that you have checked in a AWS key and all of that. But let's not just give room for such mistakes. Okay, and cross-module configurations are configurations across cross-module. So please make sure that you don't duplicate them. Suppose you are writing a new module and let's say you need Cassandra, right? You need Cassandra. Now you know that there is no Mongo, only Mongo, Redis, Kafka are utilized as messaging queues, data source, or common platforms as such. But now you need Cassandra. So first thing is you reach out to Shiva, or you reach out to Ratan or whoever, or Shriri, whoever knows it. Check with them as to whether a variable for Cassandra is already existing. If it is existing, use the same. Please don't create on your own unless it is not created. Okay. So those things have to be kept in mind when configurations are written, because if you make one mistake, then you will run into a very bad loop and you will never know which is the correct variable, which is wrong, which is updated, which is not updated. So all of this will cause a big problem when you're making a release to JUD. Okay. So those things have to be kept in mind. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Vishal, clear.
Yeah. So any questions on config management?
No.
Radhan, are you clear as to how we do this?
Yeah, pretty much clear.
All right. So now going back to the Git management part. Okay. So not Git management. Let's do the architecture part first. Okay. So you guys already know the Anuvaad architecture, right? As to how it's a, I mean, I think I already explained this in my workflow manager KT as well, and I also did a brief in translator. I'm also going to do a brief again if there is another model. The whole point of making this is to, I mean, making stressing on architecture is to make sure that you guys kind of assimilate it completely as to how it works and make, so any decision that you want to make, you should always make in sync with the architectural formats or principles of what this architecture is based on. All right. So now going to the architecture of Anuvad, you guys already know it, but let me just go through. Okay. So this is our Anuvad architecture, if I'm not wrong. Okay, so this is our architecture diagram, right? Yeah. So if you see, I mean, it's more or less the same diagram that I drew on during my workflow manager KT and also my KT with Ratan when I was explaining to him as to how architecture works. I think I have a picture of that. Probably I'll share. But yeah, so if you just look at these technologies, you architecture wise, where first one important thing is you guys should know what all technologies we use. Okay. Nginx, Zool, Kafka, cloud storage, Redis, Mongo, which is our store, and then there is shared storage, which is Samba, and then workflow manager, which is an orchestrator, Anuvad auditor, which is a logging library, and all other tools. Do you guys have any doubts in this? Any doubts in the architecture?
Yeah, no, yeah, architecture so far.
So Ratan is clear. What about Shrey and Abhishek?
Yeah, it's clear, Vishal.
Yeah, Vishal.
Yeah, I'm sure that you guys know. If you have any doubts, then please let me know. And then if you want to make any changes also tomorrow, say for example, you have Zool, right? Tomorrow you want to remove Zool and add another gateway, then it should be very simple. It should be plug and play. That's all. So so your systems before Zool, which is Nginx, and systems after Zool, which is our entire Anuvad pipeline, will not be affected in any way. Okay. So that is how whatever change you make in future should also come in. Okay. Those changes should be very seamless and as independent as possible. Okay, I know that you can never make a change which is absolutely independent, but just make sure that it is as independent as possible so that no more code changes have to be done. Now, for example, take Anuvad auditor, right? Now, let's say we didn't have Anuvad auditor, there was no logging library, and each of the module was logging on its own. In that case, there would be multiple problems. First problem is with respect to format, right? All of them would, although you tell everyone that okay, this is the format you have to follow, but there will be chances where people make a mistake, right? People can change the format of the logging, the whole log JSON that we index onto the Elasticsearch. So if that format changes from module to module, if a key is removed or added or anything of that sort happens, then you run into a big problem because you can't aggregate those logs. First thing. Second thing is, you will never know what is to be logged and what is not to be logged. Say for example, file uploader logs everything, as in what comes into the function, goes out of the function, what happens in every line of the function, input, output, everything. It's an extensive logging. But what if, say, block segmenter doesn't do it, right? So now you don't know what to log and what not to log. So all of these, like for single formatting, the guidelines for logging, all of them could be easily abstracted out because of a logging library. Now, current problem that we are facing is with respect to Elasticsearch. Now we are trying to upgrade Elasticsearch on the server, and Anuvaad Auditor uses a previous library. Now, if without Anuvaad Auditor, all these modules would have imported the Elasticsearch library, right? And all of them now have to upgrade. And now you are not sure, maybe someone will upgrade, someone will not upgrade. Maybe when someone upgrades the Elasticsearch library, they will have a conflict in other library and they'll just keep on trying to, you'll keep on fixing it, right? So all of those problems will arise. So it is always important to first recognize redundant mechanisms into our platform and then abstract it out. That is the first thing someone who manages the platform should do. So what are the common things in our architecture for every module? Forget about their core logic. Forget about what uploader does, converter does, workflow manager does. Forget the core logic. But redundant stuff that was compulsorily to be done by every module are authentication authorization, correct? You can't let anyone access APIs without token, without authentication authorization. So that is redundant. Then rate limiting. You can't just ask people, you can't just let people hit your APIs like however they want, right? You should have some rate limiting to make sure that the platform remains healthy and available for a very long time. Third thing is logging, like even because everyone logs, but that again is a redundant task, right? And then redirection. So all of the, say for example, file store now, right? What if multiple modules will want to access the cloud storage? At that time, multiple people will write AWS logic, Azure logic, GCP logic, all of that. So even that can be abstracted out. So first recognize the commonly used or commonly existing mechanisms into every service and abstract them out. So what did we do? We abstracted all the authentication authorization into Zool, all the logging into Anuvaad Auditor library, all the cloud storage connection into our file store service. That is how you should keep on making changes to the architecture, like to these services. You should know when to add a utility service and remove that redundancy from all of the services. So those conscious calls are very important for you to take, since you guys will be maintaining the architecture henceforth, right? Henceforth. So just make sure that you have all this in mind when you are making any calls with respect to architecture. Okay. Same goes with Nginx as well. So I think this part is clear. So did you guys have any questions or any doubts, anything regarding architecture? If there is anything that you don't understand, if there is anything that you think is like should be currently implemented?
No, Vishal, not as of now.
Okay. There are some implementation required in Zool. Okay. I'll come to that during KT. I'll tell you what is to be done. Okay.
Okay.
There are some changes required, not changes, but enhancements required in Zool, which I'll come to it during the KT. Now then the next is Git branching. Okay. You guys already know how we do Git branching, but my concern is that we don't follow it so aggressively, which we should follow. Okay. So Git management is a problem for almost everyone in the world. Okay. Every developer in the world, no matter how robust is your Git branching strategy, you will still run into problems. I mean, even biggest of the companies, biggest of the projects will run into such problems. But yeah, that's how you learn, right? That's how you know when you are lacking and how can you mature your strategy further, right? So to start off with, we basically have two stable branches, two long-lived branches, so to say. One is the develop branch, another one is a master branch. Okay. So master branch is the branch which will have the updated code, stable, tested, updated code should be in master. As in, anyone should be able to take a build from master and do a demo. That is what I mean when I say stable. I don't want to see any issues, any fixes or anything in master. The master should run as in sync with the updated updated features of the platform. Okay, so always make sure that when you merge to master, you take care of all the tests, you take care of the sanity of the code, formatting of the code standards, all of that. So everything should be perfectly done when it is merged to master. Okay, that is first thing. Next is develop. Develop is like a stage for master, as in before pushing to master, once you have done all your precondition test, as in you performed your unit test, regression test, smoke test, code formatting, integrate and everything. There are two things left out. One is integration testing with all other modules. Second, testing the platform or testing the product as a whole as to how would it behave when the same thing is merged to master, correct? So for that, develop should be used. Develop is like a stage for master where you push everything, test it on develop, and when everything works fine in develop, then you push to master. So develop and master are two stable branches where you can do your so develop is for testing and master is for release. And then there are multiple feature branches. Feature branches are for your specific features, right? Everyone would be working on a different module. So whenever you want to make a change to the module, you take a feature branch, you make your change, deploy to the develop branch, sorry, not develop branch, develop environment, and test your code out. Once everything works fine, write your unit tests, perform your smoke testing and everything, and then you merge to develop branch. And from that develop until and unless a integration test is done, please don't merge it to master. Once the integration test is done, once the QA signs it off saying that the product is working fine, only then you merge to master. This is a standard format across the world. Almost everyone uses the same. Then there is hotfix. Hotfix is when there is a production bug. When there is a bug which went unreported in your feature level and develop level, suddenly it shows up on master due to some problem. Maybe it's an environment specific issue or anything. We don't know, right? For such things, you always create a hotfix branch. So the hotfix directly comes out of master. Okay, so it is not it doesn't come out of feature or develop. Hotfix is a branch, you take it out of master, make your change, test it on one of your environments, and then directly merge to master. Remember this. Apart from hotfix and develop, there are no other branches which will go directly to master. That is very important. Huh? Only hotfix branches will be merged into master. Only develop will be merged into master. Every other category of branches that you create will always draw out of master, but they will not merge into master. Is that very clear?
Got it.
Yeah, because this problem had happened. Okay. By mistake, main source got merged into master, which is wrong. Okay, I'll come to main source by the way. Okay, I'll come to those maintenance branches, but for now, just remember this is the logic. Now, with respect to deployment, remember that you will always need 3 to 4 environments. According to me, my suggestion is always 4 environments or 3 at the minimum. Okay, now what are those environments? Develop, QA, UAT, and production. 4 environments are always needed. Develop your development environment or your develop and dev environment is only for developers to test. So it's a very unstable environment because developers will keep on checking in their code, even if it is not tested or even if it is not verified or anything, because that's like the playground for developers. So developers will use that dev branch, however, a dev environment, however they want. Even if there is a small change, you would want to test it on the environment, right? Once your local testing is done. So you build a feature, locally test it, and then deploy to develop and see whether it is working on the environment or not. So dev branch is only for the usage of developers for their testing and a very unstable branch. Then is QA. QA is the branch where the builds go from develop. As in, once you test on your dev environment, those features which are already tested on the dev environment will now be merged into develop. So this flow. So the feature will be merged into develop. Once it is merged to develop, the code from develop should go to the QA environment, wherein the QA should give a sign off on the feature of this sprint. Okay, of the sprint of this release, whatever that is. So you take a feature, test it on dev branch, sorry, dev environment. Once it works fine on dev environment, you you merge all those features onto the develop branch after TDD or after your testing, formatting, everything. Once you merge to develop, the code from develop should be deployed to a QA environment where QA can test. QA will never test on a dev environment. Remember that. QA should never perform any test on the dev environment because it makes no sense. Dev is an unstable branch. It will always have bugs. So there is no point of testing there. So the testing environment should be the QA environment, and QA environment is where the QA will give a sign off. A developer can never come to a QA and say that, okay, this is working on dev, but this is not working on QA. Does not make sense.
So
It should,
Vishal,
yeah.
so QA environment, you mean the users that we use currently?
I'm not talking about what we currently use. I'm just saying in an ideal scenario how it should be. Then we'll compare it to the existing system.
Okay.
Okay. In an ideal scenario, you should have a QA environment where a develop has to be tested. Once develop is tested and the QA gives a sign off that this is working fine, then the same develop branch, you merge it to master. From master, you create two builds, two releases, one to UAT. UAT is where the user acceptance testing is done. As in, even if you have built your product, even if your features are ready, but what if the user does not like the way it is built, right? So first sign off is from the QA. The second sign off should be from the user saying that, okay, this is right. In our case, who's the user? The product manager. So Karthik, Arvind, or whoever, right? So those guys should be able to test on a UAT environment. And once everything works fine, the same master build that was deployed to UAT will should go to the production environment. Now, why do we need two branches, two environments like QA and UAT both for testing? That is because QA is a specific QA testing where they do their regression testing, smoke testing, everything. UAT is an environment for product managers to perform their testing and at the same time to also give demos if required, because product managers will have very random requests coming in. Okay, some guy will just show up, call them saying, I want a demo of Anuvaad. Now, the person should be able to give a demo in the next 5 minutes. That's how you should keep the environments, right? So keep a UAT environment which is only for product manager testing and third party demos so that it is not disturbed by any of your dev or QA activity. Then you go to production where you merge to the production. Is this clear? This is the most ideal scenario as to how a release should be managed. Is this clear?
Yes, it's clear.
Ratan, is this clear?
Yes.
Okay. Now, Anuvad has two deviations. Okay. Now there are two special cases in Anuvad. One is the user's environment, which Abhishek was talking about. Second is Anuvad is a multi-production system. So there is no single production. Okay. Anuvad has one production called as Suwas. Then there is another production called as Bangladesh. Tomorrow there can be another production called as Tanzania. So Anuvad is a multi-production system. So there is no one production. So if there is multi-production, which means you need multiple branches. That's where a new category of branches comes into picture for Anuvad, which is maintenance branches. This case is not with Ulka. Ulka is just one production. Everyone comes and hits the same. But in Anuvad, since there are multiple productions, you will need multiple branches, right? So that's when you have this whole idea of maintenance branches. Maintenance branches are branches which are very specific to that particular production. So since we have multiple production, the build or the release will never happen from master, because where will you deploy master, right? There is no point. Apart from UAT, there is nothing, there is no place where you can deploy master. So instead of that, you create maintenance branches. One for Bangladesh, one for SUAS, and one for some other country. Say for example, one for SUAS and one for Bangladesh. Those two branches are again like develop only. They will come out of master, but they will not be merged into master. So you take the code from master and then make any changes that is required. Say for example, you are developing a feature. Okay, let's say you are developing some TMX feature. It is developed here, tested on the dev environment, gets merged to develop, gets tested on QA, everything works fine, goes to master, gets tested on UAT, but does not go to any production because it makes no sense, right? Because we have multiple productions. So when there are multiple productions, the release should happen from the maintenance branches, not from the master branch. So from master, you create another merge, or basically you pull these TMX changes from master into a maintenance branch. So you pull the changes into maintenance branch 1 and maintenance branch 2. I mean, although they're written hotfix, I'm just kind of creating an analogy. So let's say this is one maintenance branch, this is another maintenance branch. You pull from master into this, you pull from master into this. Once you have pulled from master, now the situation is this. TMX is the feature of Anuvaad, so it goes into master. But Bangladesh wants it, Suhas does not want it. So what you do inside the maintenance branch, you make a change here and you enable TMX. Here you disable TMX. Nothing will happen to master. Master will remain as it is, but only maintenance will change. And then you create an image or you create a release. From master, you create a release tag, which is easily done on Git. So once you create a release tag, you directly merge it into the, or you directly make a release to production. Is that clear?
Yes.
Any doubts on maintenance branches?
No.
No, right?
All good.
Yeah. So now once we grow, like say for example, when Anuvaad grows and there are too many productions, then you might need too many UATs also, right? What if there is a major change between Bangladesh Anuvaad and Suhas Anuvaad? At that time, you might need a UAT for Bangladesh and UAT for that. In that case, stop deploying to UAT from master, start deploying to UAT also from maintenance only to make sure that all of them are in sync. Okay. So this is how it should be. Dev, feature, develop, master, maintenance, and hotfix. These are 5 type of branches. Dev, QA, UAT, production are environments. This is how you should manage your release, and release should happen through tags. Whenever you are making any release to UAT or production, please tag it, saying this is version 1.0.0, this is 1.0.1 or 2.0.1, whatever that is. So release tags are very important. Is that clear?
Yep.
Okay. So now coming to Abhishek's question of user environment. Right now, the problem with Anuvaad is that we don't have to separate QA and UAT. We have just 3 environments: dev environment, QA environment, and production environment. So the QA environment itself is our users environment. Okay. Although users environment is a open source environment, as in users environment is an environment where anyone from outside the world can hit. That is what we actually created that for. But now, since we don't have a QA environment, we are using users itself as the QA environment, as the UAT environment, and also as an open source deployment of Anuvaad, which is wrong, which we should not do. Okay. So users should be separate, and then QA should be separate. Technically, we should create a QA environment, a UAT environment. The users environment that we have will go to the level of Bangladesh. So like how Bangladesh is one production, SUAS is one production. Similarly, users also will be one production, where where users is open for all public. SUAS and Bangladesh are open only for a specific set of people. Is that clear?
Yep.
That's how ideally it should be. Okay. So please just make note of these things.
Got it.
Yeah, I think this was about the Git strategy. And then, by the way, right now we don't have any Git actions. Okay. So we don't have Git actions, as in whenever you create a merge or whenever you kind of create a pull request to either developer or master, we don't have a scenario where the code is tested. Like for example, like how we are working with Nusrat yesterday, right? On this black linting and all of that. So we
Yeah.
have something like that in Anuvaad as well, where once the code is pushed to feature, there is no test required. But when it is being merged to develop, when a pull request is raised, we need a Git op mechanism, like for example, Solar Lint or Sonar Wind or anything of that sort. There are so many Git operation, what do you call, Git action tools that are available. So you add those Git tools so that whenever a PR is raised, that tool executes all the tests on this code which is being merged. And if everything works fine, as in according to our standards, then the pull request should be approved. Okay. So this is test driven development, right? This is TDD. So either you can do a Git action or testing action on GitHub, or you can do it on Jenkins. As in, although the code is merged to develop branch, the test is not done yet. The test is only done when you're creating a build in the Jenkins. So Jenkins will actually run certain tests and then figure out that, okay, this code is worthy of a stable build. Only then it will build. Otherwise it won't. So either you do a Git testing before raising a pull request, or you do it before creating a build. There are 2 ways. So you take a call, whichever it works for you, but GitHub is better. Okay. GitHub is better because it keeps the code very clean. All right. So Yeah, so I think this is it. So this is with respect to config management and stuff like that. So any doubts? Any doubts? Any questions that you want me to address? I mean, even with respect to workflow manager, glossary, I mean, even if it is anything related to the previous KTs, it is still okay.
So let me say here, because I'm currently going through workflow manager in debug mode. So, I hope you can hear me now better.
Pratham,
Your
there is a
voice
lot of
is
noise.
background noise. Not able to hear you.
I think there's some issue with your the headset or.
Okay, I hope it's better now. If not, I'll just change my earphones once. Alright, I hope
Okay, I hope I'm audible now at least.
Yeah, it's pretty clear now.
Okay, thanks. So not much of a issue with this, but I'm still going through workflow manager, debugging it line by line for sync and async separately. So once I do that entirely, I may have a few more queries, but this helped me identify like why we have OS environment variables separately and other variables as it is within WFM. So that was one thing which was in my mind, which got cleared through this. So further, if any, I'll let you know for sure.
Usually you're on mute.
Oh, yeah. So what about you, Abhishek and Shiriri? Are you guys clear?
Mm, Pretty clear, Risha. It's clear.
Okay. I think in that case, there is nothing, right? So with respect to config management and all, I think you guys already know now, so how it works. So what else? Config management, architecture, and then uh, architecture, and then this one, right? Git actions. Coding practices, I think we already did it once. I'm not sure if it's there, but yeah, we have already done that as well, right? So in terms of coding practices, uh, okay, first thing is with respect to function names, variable names, environment variable names, all of that, right? Nomenclature is very important. So I'd still see some nomenclature problems in some of the codes. Please don't do that. Always use proper English words. Don't try to create a shorthand unnecessarily if it is not needed. If it's a very big term, then that's okay. That's a very exceptional case. But in a normal case, always make sure that you stick to the Open API standards and the PEP8 formatting standards, all of that. Okay, when it comes to coding, and then even with respect to code, like creating functions and modularizing your code, making it as much as decoupled as possible. So those things are very important. I think if you go through translator and workflow manager, you will see what I mean. Okay, you will see so many functions written there. That is because those can be used wherever you want. That's exactly why we have a utility layer, right? Utility layer is a layer for all those functions which can be used across the system. So those things using global variables and thread management and process management. Since we are into Python, thread management and process management becomes very important. So we should know when to use a thread and when to use a process. If you're using a process, when to kill it, when to not kill it, and what is the amount of memory it takes. So those things are very important. I think both in workflow manager and translator, you'll see it. At the consumer end, we always trigger processes so that we perform this page operation in asynchronously. Workflow manager uses a process to kind of push into a new queue and all that. So just make sure that those practices are involved. I mean, we include them. And whenever there is an upgradation, right? Whenever there's a change in Python, please upgrade to the Python, the next stable version always, to make sure that the code is clean. The code is clean. It is working. It is as crisp and efficient as possible. And yeah, I think that should be it. Please don't write huge functions with a lot up. See, there are some cases where there is no other option. You have to write a huge function. Okay. There are some exceptional cases which I agree. But on a general case, please make sure that the functions are small, they are very crisp, and all exceptions are handled. And there is very clear API request response format. Please don't follow a non-standard request response formats. Please use a proper JSON keys. Suppose if you're using camel case across, please use camel case across. But in MongoDB, if you want, you can use. Otherwise, it's okay. So one standard that I usually follow is, since we use a NoSQL database, in order to save on transformation of data, right? Like suppose if I don't use a camel case in Mongo and if I use a camel case in JS in my request, then I should do a transformation when I read from the DB. So I just want to avoid it. That's why I use camel case everywhere. Camel case in the request and camel case in the database as well. But when it comes to variable names, I use a underscore separated names. So yeah, so something like that you also please follow. And once you make a decision on that, please make sure that everyone follows the same. Okay. So for open source projects, these things are very important. The way your APIs are defined, the functions are named, variables are named, how they are written, all of these are extremely important. So make sure that these standards are also followed along with the Git. So now it becomes easy if you have like a Git action associated with your pull request, so that these things are taken care by default. Okay. This is with respect to coding and stuff like that, which I mean, I think you guys can kind of read more and understand what I'm trying to say. And then there is another unit test framework that we have to figure out. Okay, right now we don't have like a proper unit test framework for Flask. So Python already has a unit test framework, but we have to figure out one for Flask. That task was assigned to Siddhant. I don't know what is the status on that. Please follow that up and make sure that a unit test framework is in place and at least one POC is done and we replicate the same across all the modules, because all the modules, at least 80 to 85% of code coverage is required. At least if you do 100%, that's great. But at least 80 to 85% of the core logic has to be covered through unit tests. That is one important thing. And then yeah, we should also figure out like a normal Python coding test framework as well, because not everything will be a Flask application, right? Some of them can be just a single Python script. Suppose there is a cron job, it can just be a single Python script. You don't have to actually have a Flask application. So find out a proper Python unit test framework and also a Flask unit test framework and kind of start implementing that. Those can be used in your Git action. So whenever you have a Git action, those unit test frameworks could be used for you to, kind of perform your testing and all of that. Okay. So this is with respect to the testing framework, coding standards, Git cleanup, Git merging. And yeah, with respect to access, please do an access based merge. Right now, if you see, only develop requires a approval. The merge from develop to master does not require any approval. Okay, I don't know why it is done that way. I checked with Shiva, but yeah, there was no, we couldn't follow up on that. But yeah, please add that development to merge also should go through a peer review. Similarly, a merge from develop to master should also go through a peer review. Develop to master merge should not just go through a peer review. At least two of them should do a review. And Ratan has to be the one of them, since he is going to be managing the platform. He has to do a review every time there is a merge to master. Along with that, one of you like Abhishek, Srihari, whoever wants, whoever is free can also perform a review. Okay, that's compulsory for develop to merge master. Sorry, develop to master merge. From feature to develop merge, that's okay. Like one peer review is still okay, because anyway we are going to test it, right? So that is one thing. Is there anything else? Is there anything else? Did I miss out on anything? Is there anything else that you guys want to check?
No, I think you've covered everything.
Should be okay. Okay, I think I kind of covered everything. UMS is anyway a separate thing. Okay, Sri, what is the status of your KTs to Sharath and Pinto?
Vishal, he just went out. He had to attend one call from Karthik.
Oh, Shri went. Okay, cool. Just check with him as to what is the update on KTs to Pramod and because Pramod has OCR and Sharath has a few modules. Okay, I think
as far as I know, like he has not started anything that is related to Sharath as of now. He only
I think
started with
those three did.
Pramod and Amit. He did one session.
Hmm, hmm.
I just reminded.
All right, cool. Okay, so this sounds good. Ratan, all good?
Yeah, once I have a practice for this entire process of different branches, once I look into it in detail, I think I'll have a better idea on what is exactly what. But the idea is fairly clear in my mind, like where what we go.
Okay, sure then. So, okay, I think this sounds good. So, yeah, I think we are done here then. So, Abhishek, so I mean, you are recording it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool. So, cool. If there is nothing, then we can drop off. Abhishek will also do the auditor KT today in the evening. Okay, I've sent an invite.
Sure.
It's from 4 to 5. So both of you are anyway invited. If Shriri also wants, let him join. Or basically, I mean, it's open to everyone. Whoever wants to join can join. But you two are required. Okay. So till then, just figure this out as to how to push a library to pip. I'll anyway explain how to do it. But yeah, just in so what is that setup.cfg? What is the setup.py file? How to do a release and all of that. Okay.
Yeah, I kind of did it earlier. I
Trust
briefly
me.
remember it,
Yeah.
but I had these commands written somewhere. I couldn't find them, but yeah, sure, I'll figure out those commands.
Yeah. Just brush through and then I'll anyway explain how to do it. Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay, sure then. Thank you.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sushant.